Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the third of three candidate debates and forums sponsored by the Greater Owensboro Chamber of Commerce. My name is Kirk Kirkpatrick. I'm happy to be the moderator for tonight's debates, and we have a very interesting evening lined up for everyone. As you know, we had the debates earlier last week for the City Commission and the County Commission candidates. Tonight, we have the Kentucky State Representative debates. 8 different candidates vying for 4 different seats. Our first debate will introduce you and introduce them as the District 7 candidates. On my left is State Representative Suzanne Miles. Nice to have you, Ms. Miles. And on my right, John Warren, the challenger for District 7. A couple of quick insights into tonight's program. We will begin by offering each of the candidates a 2-minute opening remark, followed by a question. We'll be alternating the questions. Each candidate gets 2 minutes to answer the question. The candidate, the challenger, will then get 2 minutes to answer the question. And then each candidate gets a 1-minute rebuttal if they so request regarding this particular question. We're going to try to have as many questions as possible. The most that we probably will be able to have is 4. And following our time, when the time runs out, we will have each candidate have closing remarks, which will be 1 minute each. Think those are all the rules and regs. We've got a great audience here tonight for those listening on WVJS Radio. And we do want to thank OCTC Channel 71 for recording and playing back these debates and forums on behalf of the Greater Owensboro Chamber of Commerce. It's kind of a very special day as we are recording this on Monday, as Owensboro Community and Technical College was just named by Tomorrow's Technician for their automotive program the School of the Year in all of the nation. That is quite an honor, and congratulations to OCTC, another wonderful designation for them. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the candidates for District 7 of the Kentucky House of Representatives.
Thank you.
We'll begin with the opening remarks with State Representative Suzanne Miles. Ms. Miles.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight and coming out and being an educated voter. My name is Suzanne Miles. I'm the state representative at the 7th District. I was elected in this past December in a special election due to the resignation of a gentleman that had to resign. Therefore, I ran for the open seat at that point, and I appreciate your support. I have had one session as a state representative during the budget year. It was a tough year, I will tell you. Being in the minority is not as glamorous as someone might think it is, but a lot of the things in this area that are most crucial to me are the infrastructure that we have. I-69 and I-67 are 2 of the most highly sought after topics in this area that's really important, and I know that's an important not only to the Chamber of Commerce but all the areas in this area. One thing I do want to make clear, because I know there's been a lot of attacks toward me on a lot of different issues, and I just want to kind of clarify a couple different things. I am not against unions. I am not against union members. I do want to make sure that we have every tool in our toolbox to make Kentucky to be a great state. And if that is right to work, then that would be the tool that we need to make our state a great state to work in. A lot of other things that have come up is that I have 2 salaries. That is not uncommon for almost every single legislator in the House of Representatives and as a senator. Most people have a job other than just being a state representative. So it is not uncommon. It just so happens I'm a federal employee. The difference is that I am not paid at the federal when I'm being paid to do my job as a state representative. So those are a few of the things that I know that my opponent and his allies have had against me this past time and most recently, and I just want to clarify a few of those. I want to thank you all for being here, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Miles. Now, opening statement by our challenger, John Warren. Mr. Warren.
So glad to be here tonight with all of you. I've got 2 minutes, right?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to congratulate the Tech College for being awarded Tech College of the Year. It's great, and it's good to have them here in Owensboro, Kentucky. I've been a lifelong farmer here in Davis County. I also had another couple of businesses off the farm. As your representative, I want everybody to know that as being a rural, more agriculture area, that I know what it is to be a farmer. I also owned a restaurant back in 1986 for 2.5 years, and I also had a milling business for 12 years over actually in McLean County. Had employees over there, but as your representative, I want you to know that I will be very, very accessible, because that's what the people do need. And, representing Union Henderson Davis would be a great opportunity for me, and very exciting to me to be able to do that. I am for certainly job creation and serving on the site-based council at Apollo High School for 2.5 years. Also, education is a big priority for me. I also served on the Youth Family Resource Center there for 3 years and one year as the board member. It kind of upsets me that our free and reduced lunch system has went from 27% up to 50% in the last several years since my first child started there at Apollo and the last one finished. So that is very close to me. I have got all the teachers' endorsements, KA endorsements, and I feel very proud of that. I'm for the hardworking men and women of this area, all areas. That's the backbone of our area, our community. That's who I will fight for, but also as being a businessman, I also will fight for all businessmen and women. I have not only been an employee, I've also been an employer. I know both sides. I breathed it and I've lived it, and I appreciate both sides of it because they do both help our economy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. As we mentioned earlier, the questions were submitted by members of the Greater Owensboro Chamber of Commerce, as well as those from the public. Then those questions were massaged to a certain degree by our own advocacy committee at the Chamber to ensure that they were broad enough to allow the candidates to address those issues and to be checked for facts as well. Our first question will go, and we will be alternating the questions. First one will go to challenger Mr. Warren. Mr. Warren, in order to make Kentucky a more business-friendly state, what legislation would you support to modernize Kentucky's tax code and address right-to-work and minimum wage issues? Mr. Warren.
Well, anytime that we can make it easier and more acceptable for our employers to create jobs for all employees, it's a great thing. In relation to the right to work issue, I am not for right to work in any way. I do not believe, and I've got a study here from Peter Phillips, who is a doctorate, who did a study, who was hired by the state of Kentucky. He was nonpartisan, and he says there's no evidence in whatsoever that shows that right to work hinders or helps the state of Kentucky or any states across, but actually it's a right to work for less, because it drops away our prevailing wage jobs. It can take construction jobs down from $20 an hour to even $14 an hour. There's no study here that shows where right to work and the unions are hurting our workforce in our businesses. It actually says here, there was no significant difference between the bids per square foot for union contractors and non-union contractors, despite union contractors paying that would have been the prevailing wage absent the repeal. They were trying to repeal prevailing wage. So there's no study showing that the union workers or anybody making a fair wage is hurting the economics of the state of Kentucky. I would be against any legislation and put a bill toward that would be against the right to work legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Ms. Miles, would you like me to repeat the question?
Please.
Okay. In order to make Kentucky a more business-friendly state, what legislation would you support to modernize Kentucky's tax code and address right to work and minimum wage issues? Ms. Miles.
Like I said before, right to work is an opportunity, and it's not against unions. It is for the opportunity for people to have the option, the choice to join a union, to pay union dues. Personally, I do not think that someone ought to have to pay to go to work. I think that we ought to have to pay that person whenever they give a good day's work. And I think that the opportunity for government to interfere in that is very hard on the employers of this state. As far as the minimum wage was something that has come up, and this past session, the vote that I took this past session, it would raise the minimum wage 39%. And I know my opponent has said in, I believe it was in the Messenger Inquirer back earlier, at least I could have been willing to have raised it a little bit. Well, most of you all know as a state legislator, when you go on that floor, the option you have to place that vote is the only vote that is on is for the legislation that's up there, and that was a 39% raise in the minimum wage. And I really did not think that that was a truly good option at that time, because I truly believe that government needs to get out of the way of our businesses and make sure that our businesses have every opportunity to do the job that they do. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce endorsed they endorsed right to work, and they truly believe that that is part of the problem with our economic development in this state. And we hear that across the state from several people involved with economic development, that until our state is a right to work state, we will continue to be ignored by several companies of coming into our state. And we all know, the people that are in this room, what a great state this is and how wonderful it would be to have more options for more jobs in this area and put people back to work. So we truly think that a lot of the things, obviously my opponent and I differ on these issues.
Thank you, Ms. Miles. Mr. Warren, would you like a 1-minute rebuttal?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Thank you. In reverse to the minimum wage, Ms. Miles voted against the minimum wage bill. I'd like to ask her if she would like to go to work for $7.25 an hour.
She'll be able to answer that in the rebuttal,
Okay.
but we'll ask you.
I would like to ask her if she would like to go to work for $7.25 an hour. And, you know, back earlier, she says I've made a statement about, you know, it's been almost 23 years since the minimum tip wage, which is $2.13 an hour, has been raised. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's right at all. For families who are at poverty level below $20,000, what would it hurt to raise it from $7.25 an hour to at least $8.25 an hour? You know, $8.25 an hour would give an income up to around $24,000 a year. Poverty level is still $23,000. How can anybody refute that?
Thank you, Mr. Warren. And Ms. Miles, you have a 1-minute rebuttal.
Well, like I said before, the minimum wage is the minimum wage to pay, not the wage that most people earn. And $7.25, most people could start at an hourly wage of $7.25, that a lot of kids start at that option, and that's not a horrible, terrible thing to start off with, because it gives the option to work hard and raise the pay that you work for. But I truly think that 39% raise, because that would be 39% raise in our groceries. Can you imagine going to McDonald's and paying 39% more on every single item that you purchased? And I really don't think that whenever I voted on that bill that my opponent gave his employees at the chicken farm 39% raise for his employees. I doubt. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miles. And if you will allow me, they both prepared biographies for a short introduction, and I, in all of the excitement, did not give that. So if you'll allow me to introduce them individually real quickly, where our State Representative Suzanne Miles is the daughter of Nancy and Billy Joe Miles, a graduate of Apollo High School and Transylvania University. Suzanne worked at Miles Farm Supply and owned and operated Town and Country Wear. She's the past volunteer with Junior Achievement, has served on the boards of both the River Park Center and Impact 100. She's a field representative for U.S. Congressman Brett Guthrie, and she's a member of the Panther Creek Baptist Church and is the current state representative of the 7th District. Mr. Warren, John Warren was molded by his family, his Catholic values, and the people of Davis County, as well as District 7. He believes the same idea today that his father instilled in him years ago, that if you work hard and play by the rules, that you can make a good life for yourself and your family. John is pro-life, begins that the people of District 7 should have access to high-quality education, good-paying jobs, and deserve someone who will work across party lines to get the job done. Excuse me for not opening with the bios, but now we will move to our second question, and this will go to Representative Miles. Ms. Miles, Owensboro's mayor, the Davis County Judge Executive, and the Chamber believe that the number one long-term economic development asset would be securing an interstate highway for our region. What actions would you take to make this happen? Representative Miles?
Fortunately, in my career with Congressman Guthrie, I've served on the 231 coalition that helped open up the 4-lane access across the new bridge. That was something that was very instrumental in kind of working with that to see where we had to go forward. With that came from I-69, the group that is specifically concerned about taking the new William Natcher Bridge and making it 4-lane all the way from Indianapolis completely to Bowling Green to I-65. And then I-69 would be over the hopefully new bridges in Henderson County. And we are working really hard to make sure the options of getting a red, white, and blue shield across those. Like I said in my opening remarks, the infrastructure of Davis County and the surrounding areas is the most crucial item that we have right now that we can work towards. We do have some goals in mind with the Palmer study that came out. We do have some options as far as knowing what avenues we need to take and how much money that we need to figure out what we need to do with that. There are some options, especially one coming up in November. There's a deadline to apply for shovel-ready projects at the federal level. I do hope that we'll be able to work towards that to see if there's some opportunities for infrastructure for the interstate access for Davis County. We all know that an interstate access for our area is the most crucial thing that we can offer right now for our constituents in this area.
Thank you, Representative Miles. Mr. Warren, would you like for me to repeat the question?
Sure, please.
Okay. Owensboro's mayor, Davis County's judge executive, and the chamber believe that the number one long-term economic development asset would be securing an interstate highway for our region. What actions would you take to make this happen?
Well, Kirk, as anybody knows with one eye and half sense knows, anytime you can get transportation through your communities, it just means more economic status for you. So I would be I am in support of I-69 and any transfer ways that we can get through the state of Kentucky, especially through the 7th District. I will fight with all the legislators up there and see that we can transfer dollars into Owensboro for I-69, Union counties, and Henderson counties as well, which also make up the district. So in Frankfort, I will be right there with all the legislators and pulling and for all the counties of Union, Davis, and Henderson to see that we get those monies and dollars here to see that that I-69 corridor comes to fruition.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Representative Miles, a 1-minute rebuttal or additional comment?
No.
Okay. And so we go to the next question. This will be for Mr. Warren. We'll begin with him. In July, the State Budget Office announced that Kentucky's budget was short by an estimated $90 million. What specific actions would you take? What legislation would you support? And what specific programs would you cut to help the state maintain a balanced budget? In addition, what is your plan to address the underfunded pension for Kentucky state employees and our educators' retirement fund? Mr. Warren.
Well, first, let me address the Kentucky State Retirement Fund. As most of us know, or some of us may not know, that fund was dipped into several years ago, which should have never happened. And to make it solvent again, it's going to take, of course, a lot of hard work, probably doing some things that a lot of people won't appreciate, and I can't elaborate on those at all, not being up there as a legislator, but I know one thing: we have to do our best to see that it does become solvent again. And folks, it's not going to happen overnight. We know that. As far as as a plan, I don't know whether we would have to do some type of tax reform or what we could do, but we all know, to be realistic about it, with the monies being short, and as short as they are, probably a lot of entities are going to have to suffer to make it solvent again, and nobody likes that, but we all got to be willing to give. As far as the teachers' retirement fund, it needs to be left alone. The teachers do not want any outside legislation dictating what happens to their retirement. They have their own board, and they're doing quite well. They do not want anybody messing with their fund. If it's not broke, let's don't try to fix it.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. And Representative Miles, would you like me to repeat the question?
Please.
Okay. In July, the State Budget Office announced that the Kentucky budget was short by an estimated $90 million. What specific actions would you take? What legislation would you support? And what specific programs would you cut to help the state maintain a balanced budget? In addition, what is your plan to address the underfunded pension funds by the Kentucky State employees and the Educators' Retirement Fund?
Well, as far as my caucus goes, we have something called Handshake Across Kentucky, and that's what we have pledged the first 30 days that we will be, if we flip the House of Representatives in the State House, to do. And one of the items on that is the teacher's pension plan. It is not to take away the teacher's pension plan, but it is to shore up, because I repeatedly heard from educators throughout session that were very concerned about their retirement and wanted to make sure it will still be there. I will tell you right now, it is very crucial for the promises that have been made in the past to make sure that we fulfill the promises that have been made in the past to the state employees, to the teachers, to our educators in every category. So that's something that's very crucial, that we make sure that we do something about that. There is one item that specifically, and I've vocalized it before, there's a huge concern with me of all the different items that money goes into different funds, and then if there's anything left over, those funds are swept into the general fund. A lot of times those items are going into a general fund where it might not necessarily go to pay for items that need to be paid for to make sure that the promises that we've made in this state are fulfilled. The obligations that we've made to the people to make sure, whether it be our veterans, our teachers, or any state employee for that matter. As far as some of the other items, Obamacare has definitely going to put a strain on the state of Kentucky with the expansion of Medicaid. And I am absolutely not for taking away people's opportunity for health care, but we need to make sure that we have health care available for people at a wage that they're able to have that option to be there. But with that being said, we can't completely break our state with the expansion of Medicaid to the point that we cannot fund our teachers' pension plan, our state employees, or anything else, that we have obligations to our state and our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miles. A 1-minute rebuttal, Mr. Warren.
Yes. On Obamacare, I know Ms. Miles said she would appeal Obamacare. And I don't see how she can appeal a federal mandated law. And even now we have right at 500,000 Kentuckians on that plan, on the Kentucky KY Connect plan that is working. And I'm sitting here looking at a lady right here in the crowd. I know it's working because she is now on it, and it's given her insurance, and it didn't got anything to do with Medicaid. It just got to do with insurance. She's not on Medicaid. She's not old enough for Medicaid. But she is now, does have a health plan that is working. And you know what? The more people we get on that plan, the more jobs it will create.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. And a 1-minute rebuttal, Ms. Miles.
Yes. I have been told most recently, the past week, some people sat down with some of the people that have signed people up for Connect. They have told me the IRS will be coming after the people that have not signed up for the Obamacare, and therefore they will be going after those people to fine those people for not signing up for it. So there is going to be a hardship that's going to come, and if that doesn't take place at that point, there are going to be people that are going to lose their insurance that have already signed up for it. So it might sound great at the moment, but from everything that I've heard and continue to hear, this is going to be a hardship going forward on our state until we figure out a way to work with it. I understand that Medicaid, it doesn't matter how old anyone is, that would be Medicare, that would be. But as far as anything that takes place, we need to make sure that we're able to fund it in this state, to make sure that we can live within our means within this state. We've kicked the can down the road way too many times, and we need to stop.
Thank you, Ms. Miles. Our final question, the Kentucky, and this will go to Ms. Miles first, the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce has designated tort reform, the local option sales tax, and public and private partnerships among their priorities. What is your position on these issues, and what legislation would you support? Ms. Miles.
You said tort reform?
Tort reform, local option sales tax, and public-private partnerships as their priorities.
Okay. The tort reform is really crucial, and that's something the medical review panels was something that repeatedly came up, and the promises were made to those groups from leadership out of the State House that they would come forward to shore up the things that we need to make sure our elderly are taken care of, anyone that is in any type of assisted living, any type of nursing home, and things like that. The medical review panel's bill never did come up. That is crucial, and that is why it continues to be a top priority for the chamber, because as long as we have the lawsuits that we're having right now throughout the state, we cannot have very many new doctors come into here just because of the malpractice insurance. We need to figure out a way to make sure that we can get good doctors here and encourage them to come to our state. We have a wonderful state to come to. We want to get them here and have great medical care, no doubt. As far as the local option sales tax, I do not have a problem at all with the local option sales tax. I do think that that goes back to the people of this area. If they can vote on a project, then they have chosen that project that they want in this area, rather than having government tell them what they want. And if they have the option to go to the polls and vote on that option, and what's even better about that is there's a sunset rule with that. As soon as that project is paid for, that tax comes off. Now, as far as P3 legislation passed this past time in the budget. Unfortunately, the governor did a line item veto on that item. And I think it's very ironic that we had every option, it passed both chambers, that P3 items were very crucial. This would be an option as far as for I-69. But the worst part of this is we could have brought it up and overridden that veto, and we did not get that option due to the leadership we have in the State House.
Thank you, Ms. Miles. A 1-minute rebuttal, Mr. Warren. Oh, no, rather, I'm sorry, this is your first time. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Please, Kirk.
Okay. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce has designated tort reform, local option sales tax, and public and private partnerships among their priorities. What is your position on these issues, and what legislation would you support? Mr. Warren.
Well, when it comes to tort reform, I think every individual, all of us as individuals, have the right, to, of course, to be represented if we have a lawful or unlawful suit against us or have been hurt in any way. I don't think there should be any limitations on the damages of what we're trying to receive. I mean, it's up to that person and their attorney to what they're going to ask for. And when it comes to sales tax and the sales tax reform, it definitely should be a public vote. No doubt about it. It should definitely be a public vote. Let our citizens address that issue, make a referendum on the ballot and let them vote on it. P3 legislation, I've heard a little bit about P3 legislation. I haven't gotten well educated on it, but I want to. I went to the hearing here in Owensboro about it. It was very interesting. It appears to me that anytime you have anybody, local contractors or local business leaders that are wanting to work with our legislators, I see nothing wrong with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Ms. Miles, would you like a 1-minute rebuttal?
Yes, please. Specifically, the local option sales tax, of those of you all that might not know what it is, it's specifically for one project. So for instance, if we had one specific item that we felt like we needed in this community, then the tax would go on specifically for that. It is not for raising the sales tax in this area. It is a tax specifically to pay for one item rather than across-the-board sales tax raise as far as that goes. And since Mr. Ward has an opportunity to rebuttal, do you also think that any charges as far as suits with domestic violence should be open-ended for how much you can ask for to sue someone for?
You're going to have to explain that just a little bit more, please.
Do you think that you ought to be able to sue anyone for any amount, no matter what the charges may be?
And Ms. Miles, thank you. Your time is up, and 1 minute rebuttal, Mr. Warren.
As I just stated, there's no legislating when you have been unwillfully done wrong. Everybody should have the chance to state their case, and if that's what we in a free country here, we receive that option. I do not think there should be a reform done on that. It's up to the attorney and what his attorney feels his client is entitled to.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. That ends our question segment, but we do allow each of the candidates a 1 minute closing statement. And by alternating, we will start with Mr. John Warren. Closing statement, 1 minute.
Thank you, Kurt. And thank all of you for being here and taking your time. I do want and look forward to being your representative of the 7th District. There are a lot of issues, as always, to be addressed, and I want to be the man to address those issues. I want to be able to work across and will work across all the party lines. We have no room for party politics. You know, I'm a registered Democrat, but I'm going to tell you what, I'm a registered Kentuckian first. And that's what this is about, being a registered Kentuckian. I am pro-life, I'm pro-jobs, I'm pro-education. I know one thing, when you got a local business in your community and you can keep the local money there, we will prosper. I know that because I have lived that. I have lived that. I will be behind all our farmers, all our men and women that are farmers, all our men and women of any type of businesses, and I will be behind all our hard-working men and women across the state of Kentucky, not only the 7th District. I want to see the flow of economics be a positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. And now for closing remarks, Ms. Miles.
Very well. I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening. I have been endorsed by the Kentucky Chamber PAC, which is a very wonderful thing to be a part of, just specifically because that means that their values match up with my values. The same way Kentucky Right to Life has endorsed me as the only candidate for the 7th District, along with the NRA, to protect the Second Amendment rights. So I do appreciate those endorsements very much as far as that goes. As far as bipartisan politics, I think that Representative Gooch is here in the room, and he knows that I co-sponsored a bill with him specifically to fight back on the energy issues that we have going forward. That is one of the most crucial items that we have going forward in this state, is fighting back against taking away the coal mines in our area. The coal mines in Union County, we also have some now in Davis County, but Union County is the largest coal-producing county in the state at this time. They also are the largest corn-producing county in this time, in this state. So I do appreciate your time tonight, and I thank you all for coming out, and I ask for your vote on November 4th and ask you to be an educated voter and choose the best person for the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miles. Will you please join me in thanking the two candidates for District 7, Representative Suzanne Miles and John Warren. Thank you both very much.
Kurt.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome the representatives, or rather the candidates, for District number 12 in the Kentucky State House of Representatives. Our two candidates, first, State Representative Jim Gooch. Representative Gooch is of Providence, Kentucky. He's serving his 9th term as state lawmaker, represents the 12th District in Davis, Hopkins, McLean, and Webster counties, and serves as the chairman of the House of Natural Resources and the Environment Committee. Representative Gooch is a co-owner of Western Kentucky Steel Corporation and which is a family-owned business, and his father established that in 1958. He's also a district representative for Modern Woodmen of America, a financial services company. State Representative Jim Gooch. Mr. Gooch's opponent, thank you very much, Ms. Mackey, is Diane Burns Mackey. Diane Burns Mackey is a graduate of Western Kentucky University. She won several awards there. She spent 35 years as an educator in the county school system, and since she was elected 2 terms for the county school board, as well as a member of the Kentucky School Board Association Board of Directors. She is the owner and operator of Mackey's Masonville Market in Utica and Kentucky Convenience. She and her husband have 3 children and 5 grandchildren, and Mackey is a member of the First Baptist Church. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our 2 candidates for District 12. Thanks for coming. We'll begin with opening remarks, and based on a coin flip earlier, we'll begin with a 2-minute opening remark, and we will begin with Diane Burns Mackey. Ms. Mackey.
I'm not used to hearing the Diane Burns Mackey as much as I have since I started running for the House. I am, for too long, I don't think this district has had an option to vote for, an alternative at the ballot box. So I decided to pitch in the hat, or so to speak. I decided to run because of the government mandates on the county schools, on the small businesses, and all of the regulations and rules that they're handing down constantly. As an educator, I can see it just piling and piling more and more on the teachers. And they seem to spend more time with paperwork than they are actually teaching children. I'm a lifelong educator, of course, and I have a business owner. And I would like to bring the small business approach to Frankfort and restore integrity to the seat. Just as important as my world experience is my membership in this community. I'm a lifelong member here, born here. My parents were here. My parents were teachers as well. And my uncle was a superintendent. My grandfather was on the school board. So as you know, I've been part of this community all my entire life. If people want to continue the status quo and see more co-jobs leave our state, then they shouldn't vote for me. Under Jim Gooch's direct watch, we've seen plants shut down and federal government trample on the rights of Kentuckians. We need a change. People should expect more from their representatives. They need to always act respectfully and use your dollars in a respectful manner. If I'm elected, I will definitely be respectful of your tax dollars, and anytime I'm representing you, I will be very honored to be representing the Kentucky that I love. I do not think it is appropriate to attack women, whether they are still living or whether they are deceased, as my opponent has. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. Time's up. And now for opening remarks, Mr. Gooch.
Thank you, Kirk. Let me say to everyone that's here, I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to be here. And for those that are listening on the radio, you know, it's encouraging today to see people that really want to be informed voters and find out a little bit about the issue and where the candidates stand on the issues. Unfortunately, we live in a time when so many people run campaigns by the media where, they want to define who they are or whatever. They want to define their opponent. And so many times the media campaigns that are run really aren't reflective at all of who the individuals are, or who the candidates are, or what their records even are. And that's been really very discouraging to me because for 20 years I've really served this district. And I think if you go back and look at my record, you'll know a little bit about who I am and what I stand for. It's been an honor to represent the people of not only Webster and McLean counties, but portions of Davis and Hopkins counties. For 18 years, I represented people in the Davis County area, and I've been honored to do that. You know, one of the things that I did when I first went to the General Assembly 20 years ago is that I realized that this area is a very big agriculture area, and so I made sure that I was on a committee that looked at agricultural issues, and that's why I wanted to be on the Natural Resources and Environment Committee. I understand that coal is very important to our area, and so that's another committee that I wanted to be on. I'm also a member of the Tobacco Task Force, but also I understand insurance because that's what I've done for so many years, and so I made sure that I was on the Banking and Insurance Committee. And I've tried to take and bring the things that I know about, the things that are in my district, to Frankfort, and to make sure that I can be your voice there. I've always tried to be accessible to you and listen to you and try to represent you in the way that I think that you want to be representative. Again, it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. And we'll begin with you with our first questions. We'll alternate back and forth. The first question, Mr. Gooch, in order to make Kentucky a more business-friendly state, what legislation would you support to modernize Kentucky's tax code and address right-to-work and minimum wage issues?
I think that's a lot. Certainly, the tax code is a serious issue. We've been talking about a budget deficit that we're having, $90 million or whatever. And the reason we're having that deficit is because the incomes that we planned on coming in to the state from our business and the individuals in sales tax and that sort of thing is not there. And it's not there because the business that we have, the economic activity is not there. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that we are doing some things that spur and actually encourage economic investment. When businesses, people want to invest money and create jobs, then that's what really stirs the economic engine of this state. And I think one of the things that you have to do when we look at the tax code, one of the first things that a tax code has to do is it has to be fair, and it has to be broad-based. And, sometimes we pass tax codes out there that really puts a burden on one area or another. And one thing we found out is whenever you tax something, you get less of it. And so I want to make sure that we are doing some things. I think we need to lower the corporate tax rate in Kentucky. I think it's too high. I think we need to make sure that we have a tax code that encourages people to come into our communities and invest. We're doing a very good job of that. I was at a meeting today where we're actually looking at the first ready building site in the state of Kentucky. And so those are some of the things that we need to be doing. We want to continue to try to do those things. As far as the minimum wage and those types of issues, I have voted in the past for a minimum wage when the economy was good. Currently, the economy is not good, and so I wasn't in favor this year of increasing the minimum wage at this time because of the sluggish economy that we have. But I think that the thing that we really need to do is make sure that businesses are able to, try to create jobs, and that's, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. Ms. Mackey, would you like me to repeat the question?
Please.
In order to make Kentucky more business-friendly, what legislation would you support to modernize Kentucky's tax code and address right-to-work and the minimum wage issues?
First of all, I would try to reduce the amount of regulations and rules that are keeping businesses under the government's thumb. I know as a small business owner, in 2000, the EPA, of course, that was federal, but the state passed it on through their chain of command to make all the gas station owners pull their tanks out of the ground. So we had to borrow $250,000 against our home to take those tanks out of the ground because they might possibly have a teeny tiny leak. So I was there when they brought those tanks out of the ground. There was nothing that was perfect, but we still were mandated or go out of the business, and we decided to spend the money and take the tanks out of the ground. But as you well know, there are many stations across the state and in our own community they had to just close their doors. So we, of course, were both teaching at that time too. So we didn't completely rely on the income from our business. I would also I'd like to do away with the income tax. I think that might be one of my first, or lower it for sure, and the corporation tax as well. I think when you do that, you would encourage more business and people to come into this community. Right to work, I'm really familiar with prevailing wage because I know as a school board member that is causing our schools to be a lot more expensive. to build. When we renovate, build, we have to pay prevailing wage. And of course, how do we pay for that? We pass that increase in taxes onto the taxpayer and our property tax increase. And you saw that recently. I have voted every time against the property tax increase. But I do think that is one way that we could reduce the cost of building new schools and government projects. The other, yes.
Time's up. Would you like a 1-minute rebuttal or additional comment, Mr. Gooch?
Yes, I would. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. And, early on in her opening remarks, my opponent said something about the jobs that's been lost because of federal regulations. And I can tell you that, if she were to get elected state representative, that she would have little control over the things that are coming from Washington and all the jobs. And I hope none of us should be held accountable for jobs that are lost because of what's happening in Washington. But I have been fighting to try to reduce regulations. As a matter of fact, this year I passed House Bill 388. It was a bill that passed unanimously through the House and the Senate. It was signed into law by the governor. And what that bill does is it makes sure that as the state of Kentucky implements regulations to reduce the carbon dioxide, that regulations have to be approved by the General Assembly. The states do have primacy in implementing regulations, and my bill was to try to make sure that we have that primacy and that the General Assembly approves those regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. Ms. Mackey, a 1-minute rebuttal?
I mean, I definitely think we need to lower the regulations. That was my point, of course, in the beginning, and lower taxes. I think you'll bring more businesses in if you lower taxes, because look at Tennessee and Indiana, where all of the big companies are locating. So I think we could easily be in competition with them. So we have to bring incentives to the table.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. The next question goes to you. Owensboro Mayor, Davis County Judge Executive, and the Chamber believe that the number one long-term economic development asset would be securing an interstate highway for our region. What actions would you take to make this happen? Ms. Mackey, 2 minutes.
Sing a song? No. I've seen, as I've traveled all over the 4 counties that I would like to represent, the sign saying future corridor for Highway I-69, and that is mostly on the pennyroyal. I think that has already kind of been established according to all of the signs that are on the pennyroyal. I think we should probably concentrate our efforts on 67 at this point. We don't want to really get in a disagreement with another county in our state, especially when we need each other as Kentuckians to work together to make this state a great state.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. Mr. Gooch, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Owensboro's mayor, Davis County Judge Executive, and the Chamber believe that the number one long-term economic development asset would be securing an interstate highway for our region. What actions would you take to make this happen?
Well, as you said, that's the long range, one of the long range things that we want to see happen in this area. But I've been working on that for quite some time. Been very involved in writing letters and trying to help determine where the route was going to be, because as you know that there was some question with Indiana as to where the bridges were going to be built, and so we've worked in the past to try to, and we now have established the route, I think, that will happen. As you know, most of that funding is probably going to come from federal, but we have to make sure that we have state funding to match that. And that doesn't just happen. I know there's been a big issue in this election about the gas tax and how that the House voted to raise the gas tax. Well, I can tell you, I've never voted to raise the gas tax. As a matter of fact, I've been rewarded with the Taxpayer's Best Friend Award. But we have to understand that there are some things that we have to do, and they require money to do those things. And we have a gas tax in this state where we have a floor of 14 cents, and then it goes up as the wholesale price goes up. But what happens is that whenever the price falls, even though the wholesale price the tax can only go up 10% at one time, it can fall back dramatically. You know that we do have a 6-year road plan in this state. In order to plan for 6 years and then try to do projects that are long-term like this, we have to make sure that we have a stable gas tax. And the good thing about a lot of the big percentage of the gas taxes is paid for people from out of state that travel through the state. So we have to make sure that we are able to commit to the funding that we have, and that may require that we at least keep the gas tax stable, not raise it. I'm not advocating raising it, but we need to keep it stable. I think that most of us aren't so much objecting to taxes. What we object to is the government wasting our money. That's what bothers me. I don't mind paying taxes, but I don't like for my money to be wasted. And some crazy projects that we've all seen and we can all identify from both the federal and the state governments.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. Ms. Mackey, 1 minute rebuttal or additional comments, if you'd like.
I think the money has already been established to fund the I-69, according to my travels along Penny Royal Parkway. So I think that that's probably the way it's going to be. I'm against the gas tax, of course, increase, because I have convenience stores, and every time they increase the gas tax, my customers come in and say, well, what are you doing? They think it's me, and I think sometimes the legislature likes for the store owner to take the blame, and that's the reason they don't mind raising the taxes. And I use my gasoline, and as probably most of us do in here, and we travel within the state and outside the state, just as those coming in are using our gasoline. I think more of us are affected by a gas tax increase than people from out of state. I disagree with his statement in that regard.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. And Mr. Gooch, 1 minute rebuttal.
Thank you. As I said earlier, there has not been any increase in the gasoline tax. There has been a movement to stabilize it where it doesn't fall dramatically when it can't go up more than 10% at a time. But now, as far as the idea that I-69 has been funding, the funding is there, I just don't believe that's the case. We're talking about 2 bridges that have to be built. Those interchanges that we're doing are very, very expensive. And as a matter of fact, the Federal Highway Trust Fund, because of gridlock in Washington, is scheduled to actually go broke, I think, by May or June of next year, 2015. So, because of gridlock that's happening in Washington, we're not even able to rely on the federal funding to take care of our existing roads. And I can tell you that planning for new projects is a real problem with the gridlock in Washington. And so we have to make sure that we do have our funding, that at least if the funding comes from Washington, that we have the matching funds.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. And the next question goes back to you. In July, the state budget office, announced that Kentucky's budget was already an estimated $90 million short. What specific actions would you take? What legislation would you support? And what specific programs would you cut to help maintain a balanced budget? In addition, what's your plan to address the underfunded pension fund for Kentucky state employees and our educators' retirement fund? Mr. Gooch.
Well, I love these questions that are so broad, and we only have 2 minutes to respond. And that's it's really difficult to talk about that many things in such a short period of time. Let me say, as I said earlier, we have a $90 million shortfall. That's not the first one we've seen. As a matter of fact, this governor's had to cut somewhere about $1.5 billion. And the reason for that, as I said earlier, what's happening is we're not getting the revenue in or the economic activity that we were planning for. And so when that happens, we're not doing some things right. And so I think that we have to make sure that we continue to, as I said earlier, we have to look at business and try to partner with them and find out what is it that you need. What are the things that we're doing wrong that that's slowing economic activity? And we're not doing those types of things. We talk about tax reform. We've had 2 or 3 commissions that have been studied to do that, and we get the reports, and then they just lay on the desk, and nobody actually does any of those things. And they don't do them, I think, because it's there's a lot of disagreement on what's progressive and what really works and what's fair to one group. And that's what I said earlier. A tax code has to be fair. In my opinion, what's fair is maybe a little different than what someone else's opinion is what's fair. But it's an issue that we cannot move this state forward if we don't seriously address comprehensive tax reform.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mackey, would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure. Just go ahead.
In July, the state budget office announced that Kentucky's budget was an estimated $90 million short. What specific actions would you take? What legislation would you support? And what specific programs would you cut to help maintain the state's balanced budget? In addition, what is your plan to address the underfunded pension for Kentucky state employees and our educators' retirement fund?
And I did read that article about the $90 million shortfall, and I did notice that the increase, or the amount of money that we did get was from sales tax. And I did contribute my share of passing on the sales tax from my customers to the state, as did many other businesses, I'm sure. So that is definitely a good source of revenue. I would cut spending. I have seen many ways in which that the state could cut spending. I can even see it many ways in the school system, and well, not with the teachers, but in just certain ways, and travel and conferences and things that the state is spending on that is not necessarily the most important. And of course, the pension fund, I'm very appalled at the fact that they have not been funding our teachers' retirement system. Of course, I'm already retired, my husband is too, but I have a son that's teaching, and that may not be there when he retires. I cannot imagine not paying my portion of the Social Security fund, that when I have employees working for me, I have to pay my portion, and they match, and that goes to the government. But yet the state feels like they do not have to match what the teachers are putting and taking out of their check, putting into a retirement fund. Worse than that, the medical fund is even worse shape. I'm thankful that we do have a board that is selected by teachers, and it's not actually, our pension plan is not run by the government where they can just go in and take money out as they have in the past. I do understand they have put a portion of the money back into the fund, and that also is the same case in the state police, the firefighter, any state employee. I just can't imagine how they could feel honor in the fact that they are not contributing to our education pension fund when we do not have Social Security.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. Mr. Gooch, a 1-minute rebuttal or additional comments?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think this last session, we did vote for a budget that actually fully funds the ARC. That's the required contribution to the pension plans. And so we are committed to doing that, and we are definitely trying to do that. But one of the problems that we see, and when we talk about cutting things and services, I think that we need to provide services in a way that's maybe more economical or whatever, but there's some things that maybe we can't cut. What we always try to do is we may go in out there and we'll cut something that's easy to cut. For instance, if we cut Meals on Wheels to senior citizens and some of those home visits, what may happen is that person may end up in a nursing home on Medicaid, and it's going to cost us 30 times more. So we have to make sure that the things that we cut aren't investments, or they're not things that are, pay me now or pay me later type things. And that's often the things that we end up cutting first. And so I want to make sure that we don't do that. We need to continue investments in our children and our seniors and our businesses in this state.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. Ms. Mackey, 1-minute rebuttal.
I think that they should fund the funds that they have promised to fund. That's basically the person that has been in there for 20 years, and that's been going on for 20 years. They have not matched the funds that the teachers have put in, or the police or the firemen. So I think that in itself speaks for itself, that education and the state workers are not the highest. They're not held in the highest regard.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. And the final question will go to you, Ms. Mackey, first. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce has designated tort reform, the local option sales tax, and public-private partnerships among their priorities. What is your position on these issues, and what legislation would you support?
Of course, anytime I hear reform, I go, what kind of reform are they going to hand down now? Because I've seen so many different reforms in education. This governor is in here 4 years or 8 years, and they hand out new reform. Then the next governor comes along, and they're going to reform our education. So I'd like to have more specific in the tort reform. I know the medical review panels is a good idea. I think it would have to be it definitely would have to be represented by all parties, both doctors and attorneys. That is what they tried to do in the site-based councils in the educational field. I think that's the only way it would be fair. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I do think it needs to be really looked at from all different perspectives before it's set into law. What was it?
The other two were the local option sales tax and the public-private partnerships.
Yes, I'm for anything that the local decides. If they decide they want a project and want to fund it with the local sales tax, that's up to the people, and they should vote on it. And the private-public partnerships also sounds like a good idea. It would be up to, and how would you choose what private partner would go with the government, and who would be the managing partner? There would be a lot of things that need to be decided before that would go into effect. I don't know that, I'm sure that is been used in other states, and it may have worked. We need to investigate if it's been successful with the public and private partnerships. I know we are in schools, we actually ask for private donations from the public and the businesses to help support different activities in the schools.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. Mr. Gooch, would you like me to repeat the question? The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce has designated tort reform, the local option sales tax, and private-public partnerships among their priorities. What is your position on these issues, and what legislation would you support?
The reason I supported the local option sales tax is that it actually involved a vote of the public for two things. One was to put it on the ballot to let the public decide that it would be allowed, and then it would have to be voted on at the local level. So the local level would have to establish a project, and then that money would have to be voted on by the people. And as mentioned earlier, once that project is paid for, then that tax would come off. And that's something that usually doesn't happen, is that taxes never seem to come off. So I do support the local option sales tax. The P3 or public-private partnerships is working in a lot of states. I think that there's some things that government does well, but there are a lot of other things that businesses do well. And I think that by doing public-private partnerships, we can kind of merge the things that each one of us do best and hopefully get better outcomes at a better price for the citizens out there. Tort reform, I know that's kind of a hot-button issue. I think that if we do tort reform, we have to make sure that we don't limit someone's constitutional rights. Our Constitution says that we can't limit their right to the court system, but we also have to realize that there are instances where attorneys, some of my friends, who will file a lawsuit that they know has no merit in the hopes that someone will just settle, and that drives up the cost for all of us. And I think that we need to look at ways where if you knowingly file a suit that you know is not right, that you may have to pay for or some type of penalty for filing those types of lawsuits. We have to do some things to make sure that we have honesty in the system, because no system can work where people don't care about the truth. And I'm a little concerned about in some of the judiciary system we have, we often see people who defend someone that they know is guilty, and they'll try to get them off on a technicality. But by the same token, we see prosecutors, they will withhold information and maybe prosecute somebody that they're not sure is guilty. And so what we have to do is we have to bring honesty into that judicial system to make it work for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. Ms. Mackey, would you like a 1-minute rebuttal or additional comments on this subject?
No, I think I'm fine.
Okay. And we'll go to closing remarks, and we'll begin with Mr. Gooch. Mr. Gooch, you have 1 minute for closing remarks.
Okay. Thank you. Again, I wanted to say I appreciate everyone taking the time out to come out tonight. I just want you to know that it's been an honor to serve you for the last 20 years. Actually, it's 10 terms in the General Assembly. Excuse me, I'm seeking my 11th term. I've enjoyed representing the people of Kentucky. It's a tough job. We are away from our families a lot. We go to Frankfort, and we're there for 60 days, every other year. And I know when my son, he was just about 12 years old when I got elected, and he's in the audience today, soon to be 33. But one of the things that I missed a lot of ball games, and so I have actually given up a lot for this job. But the rewards have been great, and it's really good to be able to help people and to know that you've done things that help people. But we do make sacrifices. But I'm willing to make those sacrifices because I think what we're doing is very important. And I hope that you will approve of the job that I've done, and I hope that you'll send me back for 2 more years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. Ms. Mackey, closing remark.
Of course, everybody here probably knows me and knows my background, where I'm from. My education makes, my experience as an educator makes me a superb candidate. As a small business owner, I'm also into farming, and my husband raises the tobacco. My dad was an ag teacher, so that's how we were we grew up on a farm, and so I'm part of this community, and I'm in every possible way. I actually was propelled to run because of so many things I didn't like going on in the state legislature. I thought that, you cannot act the way some of our legislators are acting when you are being paid by the taxpayer. You need to respect the taxpayer above all. They are the ones that are footing the bill for the state. We should never forget that you are the ones that have put us there and that are paying your hard-earned dollars for us. Don't vote for me if you don't want a change and you want to keep more of your money. That's what I tell everybody. If you want to keep more of your money, vote for me.
Ms. Mackey, Mr. Gooch, thank you very much. Join me in thanking the candidates for District 12. Thank you both. Our two candidates vying for the District 13 seat are State Representative Jim Glenn and opponent Alan Braden. Let me give a short bio introduction as we're provided by the candidates for us. State Representative Jim Glenn. Jim has served as the state representative for District 13 since 2007. He's a member of the Appropriations and Revenue Committee and the Agriculture and Small Business Committees. As an active member of the Owensboro Christian Church, on Sunday you will often see Jim welcoming visitors. As state representative, Jim has regularly received the endorsement of the National Rifle Association, the Kentucky AFL-CIO, the Kentucky Education Association, and the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. With a degree from the University of Kentucky, Jim is the father of 2 adult children, both graduates of Apollo High School. Representative Jim Glenn. Jim, thanks for coming today.
Thank you very much.
The opponent is Alan Braden. Mr. Braden is the owner of Braden Financial Services, a certified public accountant and a certified financial planner. He's the graduate of Western Kentucky University. He has served as chairman for the Mayor's Committee on Business Development, the Mayor's Advisory Committee on the privatization of the Owensboro Riverport Authority, the Finance Committee for Owensboro Health, and the Greater Owensboro Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Building Committee for the Owensboro Christian Church, where he is a member. Alan served as past city commissioner, and Mr. Braden and his wife have 6 children and 11 grandchildren. Please join me in welcoming Alan Braden.
Thank you.
So each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening remarks, and we will begin with Mr. Glenn.
Thank you very much. My name is Jim Glenn. I represent District 13, City of Owensboro, Daviess County. I am finishing up my 4th term. I'm running for my 5th term in the Kentucky State Legislature. I was a city commissioner prior to that. I am currently a teacher, and I teach here at Owensboro Community and Technical College. I've been here for 25 years. I'm a tenured full professor. The items that I focus on is basically jobs, and I've been working on those since I've been running. I focus on the middle class, the working class people, because the middle class people have been really hurt in this society over the last 40 years. I also work on infrastructure, economic development, and education. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Mr. Braden, opening remarks.
Thank you, Kirk, and thank you, Chamber, for hosting this event, and thanks to all of you for attending and all those at home listening. I am Alan Braden. I'm married to Nan Triplett. We have 6 children, 11 grandchildren between us. I was born and reared in Providence, Kentucky, 3rd generation Kentuckian. I've lived in Owensboro 42 years. I've been a self-employed small business person for 40 of those years. I've served on many boards, as Kirk said, and committees, and have been the chairman of several. My accounting degree was earned at Western. I'm a certified public accountant and a certified financial planner. Both Mr. Glenn and I have college degrees, and we've earned the right to use professional initials with our name. But I believe that this election is not so much about our education as it is about issues and leadership. Over the next several minutes, you're going to see that there are several differences between Mr. Glenn and I in our philosophy: pro-life versus pro-choice, reducing state debt versus increasing state debt, reforming the tax code versus increasing taxes, and our plans on how to increase jobs in Kentucky. As I said, Nan and I have 11 grandchildren. 10 of them live in Kentucky, so I have a very vested interest in the future of Kentucky and understand the current needs. My leadership skills have been developed first as a small business owner, as a city commissioner, as chairman of the board and chairman of the finance committee at Owensboro Health, as chairman of the board of the Owensboro Chamber, as chairman of the committee to build a new sanctuary at Owensboro Christian Church, as chairman of those two special committees you mentioned, Kirk, the committee to consider privatization of the Riverport, and the mayor's committee on business development, and probably most important, while coaching my children in t-ball and high school hockey. In any election, there's no perfect candidate and no perfect party. I would hope that over the next several minutes you find that my ideals and leadership skills are worthy of your vote next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden, and we'll begin our first question with you, Mr. Braden. In order to make Kentucky more business-friendly, what legislation would you support to modernize Kentucky's tax code and address right-to-work and minimum wage issues? Mr. Braden.
Well, Kirk, there's no single thing that makes us more business-friendly. I think two of those things you mentioned definitely do that. I think we need to take a hard look at tax reform. As 40 years of preparing income tax returns, I understand the complexity of them. They can be simplified, first of all, and second of all, they need to be more competitive. We need to be more competitive to attract more businesses to the community or to the state. The right to work is a tool that I think we need to take a hard look at. Right to work is not an anti-union vehicle. It's a individual rights vehicle. There are 24 states that now have adopted right to work, and I'm told throughout the state that when economic recruiters talk to industries outside of the state, one of the first questions is, do you have right to work? And when the answer is no, that stops the conversation a lot of time about that industry choosing to relocate or to locate a business in Owensboro. I got Owensboro on the mind. That's the district I serve. But to locate in the state. The minimum wage is something, Mr. Gooch actually addressed that pretty well. There are times when it's appropriate and times when it's not appropriate. And as we're struggling to get new jobs which create revenue, and some of these businesses are suffering throughout the state, it's not the time to increase minimum wage.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Glenn, would you like for me to repeat the question?
Yes, sir. I'd
Okay.
be more than welcome.
And it's totally up to you. In order to make Kentucky more business-friendly, what legislation would you support to modernize Kentucky's tax code and address right-to-work and minimum wage issues?
Of the tax code right now, well, they can look at. It needs to be adjusted. It needs to be changed. I have gone to tax code meetings across the state over the last year and a half. The state held about 6 or 7 different tax code meetings asking the public how they need to adjust the tax code, and we are currently looking at that. Minimum wage. I'm going to tell you something, gang. I can talk about this for an hour and a half, and I know I only have 2 minutes. I'm trying to figure out how to present this in 2 minutes. When I was a teenager, I worked for $1.25, which was what minimum wage was when I was a teenager. At $7.25, you cannot even currently afford a hamburger at McDonald's. When I was a teenager, at $1.25, the hamburger was 15 cents. That same 15-cent hamburger is now 90 cents. At $7.25, you can only afford a 61-cent hamburger, and it does not exist in our society. Minimum wage is a polarizing issue. There are no research programs on that issue. People talk about employment. People talk about a livable wage and lifestyle. There are no research. There's not any research in that core area. And I see right now I'm running out of time on this core item. What item am I missing?
Well, time is up. We are going to have a rebuttal time if Mr. Braden would like to. 1 minute additional comments. And
No, I'm good.
Okay. So we'll go to the next question. This will go to Mr. Glenn. Owensboro's mayor, Davis County Judge Executive, and the Chamber all believe that the number one long-term economic development asset would be securing an interstate highway for our region. What actions would you take to make this happen? Mr. Glenn.
I've already taken actions in that area. I have met with the mayor. I've met with the governor. I've met with the county judge. all on trying to get a interstate in this community. We already know it's going to cost $500 million to build that bridge between Owensboro and Henderson across the Ohio River. The problem is money, and it's going to take time. We've been working on this project probably for the last 5 or 6 years. I figure it's probably going to take another maybe 10. Some of us will be gone by the time we see it, but we know where it should go. It will help our community. I do support it.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Mr. Braden, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I don't think so,
Okay.
Kirk. Kirk, there's no question that an interstate or even what we used to call toll roads coming through a community help the viability of that community. No question whatsoever. We missed the Western Kentucky Parkway through politics many years ago, and so it bypassed us. The opportunity to get 69 or 67 is a tremendous opportunity. With every opportunity, though, there comes a cost. And I think my forte is digging into financials that people at Owensboro Health would tell you, people at the city of Owensboro would tell you from my experience with them. I know how to look at financials. And I know, and it's not all funded by the state, but we got to figure out a way to come up with our share before anything can happen.
Thank you very much. And I think we have a 1-minute rebuttal. Is that right, Jessica? Yes. Mr.
Okay.
Glenn, if you'd like.
My rebuttal is this. I do not believe in right to work for less. I'm going back to the first question. I just don't believe in it. You have a right. The only thing I have to sell is my wages or my labor. Who's going to give my excess wages back to the people who's buying the product? When people talk about right to work, and the majority, I looked it up today, the largest number of states with the lowest unemployment are states that do not have right to work. People keep talking about this as if it's a given, and it is not. The guy who owns the company is not giving those extra wages back to the people who he's getting the business from. He's asking me to take a cut in my pay, and he's not taking a cut in his. I don't think it's fair. I've asked that question over and over again. Again, I do not believe in right to work for less. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. And Mr. Braden, rebuttal or additional comments?
Yes, sir. First of all, not all states without right to work have lower unemployment. Indiana, for example, which has right to work, has a smaller unemployment than the state of Kentucky, according to the Bureau of Labor this last month. Also, right to work is not an attack on a person's wages. In fact, if you choose not to be in a union and you work for a union shop, then you don't have the union dues coming out, so you have more of your income you get to keep. I think that in order for us to have more jobs, we need to look at this hard and as one of the tools. Now, I know that right to work is not the only thing that will bring businesses to a state. Indiana has shown that. You have to have reduced regulations, you have to have a good tax code, and you have to have something that encourages people to look at Kentucky.
Thank you. And now the next question will go to you, Mr. Braden. In July, the State Budget Office announced that Kentucky's budget was short by an estimated $90 million. What specific actions would you take? What legislation would you support? And what specific programs would you cut to help the state maintain a balanced budget? In addition, what is your plan to address the underfunded pension for Kentucky state employees and our educators' retirement fund?
It took you about 2 minutes to read that question, Kirk, let alone 2 minutes to answer it. You know, you have to look hard at our budget. And the thing, if you're going to increase revenue, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can raise taxes, or you can generate jobs that create more income tax, more sales tax. They have more spendable money. My plan would be to work at increasing the jobs, and we went through that with what I think it takes to do that. As far as cutting expenses, wasteful expenses is what you want to cut. The pensions, last year, 2013, the legislature addressed some of those issues. In fact, the Kentucky retirement system is under a new plan this year. The teachers' retirement, I read in the KEA news just this month that they have $18 billion in assets. Their problem is that fund's only 50% of the actuarial calculation of what they need. So they're $18 billion short. It's a lot of money where I come from. The problem is that we have defined benefit plans at all of these levels. Defined benefit says we're going to pay you a certain amount for life. There are over 1,000 people 90 years of age or more collecting from Kentucky Every Teachers. That's wonderful. I'm glad that we do that. We've got to keep our promises to people who are depending on that income. No question about that. But we're going to have to sit down among all the parties, not just the legislator, but all the parties, and sit down and figure out a way to make this a sustainable system going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Glenn, would you like me to repeat the question?
No.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, because you took a long time reading it the first time. Here's the problem with this whole problem. This problem with us go back about 50 years, maybe 60. We started adding companies to the Kentucky State Pension Plan that were not part of the Kentucky State Pension Plan. We did this in the 50s. It hurt our system. When we had surpluses, the public came back to us and said, I want this project done, I want this project done. Forgetting that anytime the economy goes up, it also goes down, which is why we have business cycles, which is something I teach econ in the morning. Econ 1 and Econ 2, and I talked about that this morning in econ. The economy does not go directly up, it goes up and down constantly. When we had surpluses in the 1990s, we should have put that money away, and we didn't. We spent it. Now we're in an economic downturn, and we need that rainy day fund and that surplus, and we don't have it. As far as the pensions are going, we're trying to correct that. It's really a difficult problem because there are people in the system that shouldn't be in the system, and we can't do anything about that, and they've been in the system for 30 or 40 years. We have to make adjustments to it, and what we're trying to do is trying to figure out how to fully fund this system to keep it working. The people have already paid in, and they have to get their money back out, and we'll try to do the best job we can.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn. Mr. Braden, a 1-minute rebuttal or additional comment?
Well, additional comments. Mr. Glenn's right in the fact that we've had quasi-government entities join these pension funds. The 7 counties up in Louisville, the lawsuit that this year, which said that the state is responsible for those people under that system, puts a hardship on our pension plans. And things did happen a long time ago when we should have been more saving. We as individuals need to save for the future. We as a state need to save for the future. But we are where we are. And over the last 8 years, we've increased the debt in Kentucky through the budget by over $6 billion. So we're increasing debt, raising taxes, making it tougher and tougher for our taxpayers and citizens of Kentucky to make it.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. And Mr. Glenn, a rebuttal? No.
I'm good.
That's right. The final question will go to you, Mr. Glenn. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce has designated tort reform, the local option sales tax, and public and private partnerships among their top priorities. What is your position on these issues, and what legislation would you support?
Local option sales tax, I have no problem with. I've talked to the mayor about it. I've talked to the county judge about it. I'm on board with that. They have talked to all the legislators in this area. And to the best of my knowledge, all the legislators that service Daviess County is on board with bringing that 1 cent sales tax back that the public can vote on projects for. It's a good deal for us. It's a good deal economically for us. So as far as that's concerned, I'm on board. As far as tort reform is concerned, listen, the little guy a lot of times does not have enough money to go to court to fight the big guys. And tort is the only way he has to do it. So I believe in leaving the program in place like it currently is. I know it upsets a lot of people. They say it's unfair, but what it gives is the little guy a fighting chance. And I support the little guy. Thank you.
Mr. Braden, would you like for me to repeat the question?
No, sir.
Okay.
Public-private partnerships, I'm all in favor of as well. It needs to be handled in such a way that there's no favoritism in these partnerships, but it definitely needs to be handled. Local option sales tax, I'm not quite as comfortable with, because regardless of whether it's being passed on at the local level or the state level, it's still an additional cost and additional tax to the citizens. Now, under this scenario, there would be two votes: one, to allow it, first of all, to change the Constitution to allow it, and second of all, at the local level for a particular project that is presented and sold to the citizens. I would consider it if we're sure that the sunset clause will take effect, if we're sure that the right projects are being funded, and it's not just a way of raising more money for operating costs in the community. Tort reform, I do believe that we need to address tort reform. While on the hospital board, I understand that we had a hard time recruiting physicians. With the new hospital that was built while I was there, it was still difficult at times to recruit physicians because of the malpractice cost. As I said earlier, every decision has a cost. Sometimes the cost is financial. Sometimes the cost is maybe in loss of service or slowdown in the judicial system, and those things I don't want. I've read the plans, the bills that have been presented. Medical Review Committee is one of them, and I want to understand it more before I approve any of them. I will not just give a blanket approval on a particular plan until I understand it better. But I do think we need it.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. 1 minute rebuttal, Mr. Glenn. Okay, so we will now go to our closing statements by both candidates, and we will begin with Mr. Braden.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your attention this evening. I hope you have a better understanding of some of the issues that I think are facing our state and where we stand on those issues. I urge you to exercise your right to vote for the candidate or candidates of your choice next Tuesday. In all elections, you have a choice, and you have a choice for your state representative in District 13. I've been endorsed by the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, the Kentucky Right to Life, ALPAC of Kentucky, and Commonwealth Policy Center. If you believe that the current job development policies coming out of Frankfort need to be changed, if you believe that we do need to create a more business-friendly environment in Kentucky, if you believe we do need tax reform in Kentucky, if you believe we no longer need business as usual coming out of Frankfort, and if you believe in pro-life issues, then I ask for your support and your vote next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. And now closing remarks, Mr. Glenn.
How much time do I have? 1 minute.
For closing
I
remarks.
want to make this perfectly clear. When my opponent started this talk, he tried to make it sound like he and I have the same educational background, and we do not. I have a BS degree from Wisconsin State University. I have an MBA from University of Wisconsin. I have a doctorate from University of Kentucky. I've also completed all the work on a second doctorate in business. My job is to be the best teacher possible in the classroom, to give our students the best chance they can to survive in this environment. You cannot generate an economy without an educated workforce. One of the reasons I ran for the state government is because I wanted to sit on the education committee at the state level. I am trying to help our kids. My wife that died 5 years ago was the outstanding teacher of the year for the entire state in 1997. She could flat out teach. Part of the library is named after her. We both got our doctorates from University of Kentucky. My son is now finishing his doctorate, University of Maryland. And my daughter's in the audience. She is smarter than a whip. Mechanical engineer at Duke Energy. We believe in education. We always have. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. It's good seeing you. Make sure you vote next Tuesday. I appreciate your vote, and thanks for listening on the radio.
Thank you, Mr. Glenn, and thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Braden and Mr. Glenn, our candidates for District 13. Thank you both very much. This is our fourth and final debate for the evening. The two candidates vying for District 14 here in the Kentucky State House of Representatives, State Representative Tommy Thompson and Mary Ann Turley. Join me in please welcoming both of our candidates here. Those of you in the audience, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's open by giving a short bio supplied to us by the candidates. First, State Representative Tommy Thompson. Representative Tommy Thompson serves as the president of Thompson Homes Incorporated. He received his BS in Business Administration from the University of Florida and his MBA from Indiana University. He was named the Outstanding Young Man of Owensboro and has received the Mayor's Award for Excellence. Currently, Representative Thompson is serving his 6th term in the Kentucky House of Representatives in District 14 and is the House Majority Whip. He also serves on numerous other state committees. Ladies and gentlemen, State Representative Tommy Thompson. Tommy? Challenger is Marianne Turley. Marianne has a bachelor's degree in sociology and a master's degree in psychology. She was initiated into the National Honor Society in psychology and completed graduate work in school administration. Marianne taught psychology at the community college and has been the administrator of Majesty Academy. She's owned Marianne's Shop on Main in Beaver Dam, and in addition, she held a property and casualty insurance license while assisting her husband of 43 years at Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance Agency. Please join me in welcoming Marianne Turley. We're going to begin with the opening remarks by our two candidates. Toss goes to separate State Representative Mr. Thompson. 2-minute opening remark.
Kirk, thank you and good evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I want to thank the Chamber for sponsoring this forum. I want to welcome our folks that are listening on the radio. It's always a great opportunity to be able to share briefly tonight our vision for the future of our district and certainly our state. Well, I've had the privilege of representing the people of the 14th Legislative District, which is the eastern part of Davis County and all of Ohio County for the last 6 terms. I've worked very hard to reflect the values of the people that I represent and advocate for the priorities of the people of the 14th District. But I want to go back to Frankfort, continue working to enhance job growth and job retention. I've had the pleasure of sponsoring major job growth legislation, working with the governor over the last several years that's served to do just that. And it's so important that we continue to make sure that our young people have an opportunity for employment when they come back to Kentucky after they graduate from schools. I think it's also important that we have job retention. We have to have workforce development. That's why it's so important that we have the ATC is being funded now here to advance job retention and job growth. Also, I want to go back and continue to strengthen education. We can't have economic success if we don't have academic success. That's why I was pleased to support the budget that gave raises to teachers, put more money in the SEEK formula, added more broadband to our schools, and funded textbooks for the first time in 6 years. I want to continue to work on our infrastructure to make sure that we have the commerce and the vehicle of transportation that can lead our state and our counties forward. And finally, I want to continue to work to make affordable health care available to all Kentuckians. So I look forward to the questions, and again, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Now, Ms. Turley, opening remarks.
I appreciate the opportunity to be in a debate. I appreciate the work you've done to put this on. I am not a career politician. I'm a 64-year-old grandmom. I don't tell you that to have you put me a lower standard of achievement. I tell you that because I'm inviting you to cause me to have to raise to a higher level of integrity than perhaps our politicians sometimes feel they're responsible for. You're sitting in a hall named Blandford Hall. Perhaps you noticed the gentleman's picture in the back. He was a state representative from this district several years ago. I'm quite certain he went with the highest of hopes of helping our state, doing all the right things to make this a better place for Kentuckians. But somewhere along the way, he lost his way. I have a number of people tell me as I campaign, "You're a very nice person. Please don't go. They'll corrupt you." They think that's good advice for me. I don't want to go and be corrupted. It's not my heart to be corrupted, for sure. But it is important to me to go and protect the people that I care about in the state. And let me just say first, I want to protect the most vulnerable, the infants, the innocents, the ones that are not yet born, that are under attack in this state. I want to protect our kids, the educational system, that it not be an experimental thing again. Every 25 to 30 years, we do an experiment on the kids in the educational system. It needs to be functional, not experimental. I want to protect the working moms and dads, whether it's through the union, right to work, whatever program comes up next. I want the people to be honestly protected. And we want to protect the elderly that are on fixed incomes that cannot tolerate more tax.
Thank you, Mrs. Turley. The first question will go to Mr. Thompson. In order to make Kentucky more business-friendly, what legislation would you support to modernize Kentucky's tax code and address right to work and the minimum wage issues? Mr. Thompson.
Kirk, first of all, it's very important that we have a competitive business climate in Kentucky, and concerning our business-friendly climate, we have to have a tax code that's more reflective of the type of economy we have today in Kentucky. That's why Lieutenant Governor Abramson embarked upon a one-year study to look at ways to modernize Kentucky's tax code. The result of that was supporting or suggesting 57 reforms that in the aggregate would add about $700 million in new taxes. Now, obviously, we're not going to adopt all those, but some of those, like angel investor tax credit, which I was pleased to support and we passed in this last session, the repeal of the distillery barrel tax, help Kentucky businesses grow and create more jobs. We've got to have 4 tenets with tax reform. We have to have a tax code that's competitive. We have to have a tax code that's simple. We have to have one that's adequate, and we have to have one that expands in terms of Kentucky's economy. It has to be more elastic. We have to have a tax code that encourages people to live and work in Kentucky. I think we need to broaden the base. We need to perhaps have more taxes on consumption and less taxes on wages and salaries. Considering the minimum wage, 13 states have passed the minimum wage this year. Job growth in those 13 states has been higher than the states that have not passed it. People think about minimum wage and they think about people that work at McDonald's and just flip hamburgers, but 62% of the people that earn a minimum wage are single women. We need to have a sustainable wage so that they can have a living to pay their utility bills, to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage. And statistics show that that money that they make with a higher wage gets spent in the economy. Also, when it makes a difference for raising the level and the opportunities for them to take care of their family and to grow their careers.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Turley, would you like for me to repeat the question?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Taxes do matter. They matter to businesses. And I'm looking at a Tax Foundation report, and they're telling us that when a state has to go to all types of packages, tax incentive packages and reductions in order to lure business, that they're covering for a woeful business tax climate. It's more effective to have a systematically improve the business tax, not try to offer all these incentives to woo people into to our state. We found that the best tax systems will be the most competitive in attracting new businesses. So we want to look at our tax system objectively so that it can attract new business. We need to realize that we are a mobile workforce and a mobile business place. So people go, businesses move. They aren't moving overseas. Everybody thinks, oh, that's international. No, they're moving state to state to the next state that's more business friendly, and it's all done in the tax code. As far as the minimum wage is concerned, that's such a difficult issue because I would not want to hire an employee at the minimum wage. I would not want to do that. As a matter of fact, we don't in our business usually ever hire anybody at minimum wage, but there is a place for a minimum wage for entry level. And when you talk about that, the economy that it'll be spent in the economy, you know why it'll be spent in the economy? Because everything will go up as a result. So you have to think in terms of, let's weigh this out and not be rash, but to be reasonable to the worker.
Thank you, Mrs. Turley. Mr. Thompson, a 1-minute rebuttal or additional comments?
Yeah, Kurt, and just on the right to work issue, a very important subject, but we have a very balanced labor management climate in Kentucky. For example, when you took it to Kentucky's largest employers, Toyota, which has over 7,500 employees, they're non-union. And then you look at Ford Motor Company, which has about 8,000 employees between their two plants, they're union. So we've been fortunate in Kentucky to have a very balanced climate, and I think that's been good. We've created over 13,000 jobs last year that resulted in $3.3 billion in investments being made in Kentucky. Site Selection Magazine, which is a very reputed national magazine, has ranked Kentucky the 9th best business climate in the country. And we have the 4th best climate for growing entrepreneurial jobs, which is so important. So I think that subject would be very divisive. I think we're creating jobs in Kentucky now. We need to continue to work together to foster labor management participation and agreement.
Thank you. Mrs. Turley, a 1-minute rebuttal or additional comment?
Yes, the CNBC put out a poll, it just came out, or their ranking of states. Kentucky fell 39th. We're number 1 in the country for cost of living. We do have a good cost of living, but our cost of doing business, we're 14th, and the economy, our economy here is 46th. Our infrastructure, we're 29th. Our workforce, we're 29th. Our quality of life is 42nd. Our technology and innovation, 37th, business friendliness, 36th, and education, 35. Our access to capital, we're 47th. So we have a lot of work to do. Now, when we reform our tax code, that can be done rather quickly, but the other issues, we need to be working on those.
Thank you, Mrs. Turley. The second question will go to you. Owensboro's mayor, Davis County Judge Executive, and the Greater Chamber of Commerce believe the number 1 long-term economic development asset would be securing an interstate highway for our region. What actions would you take to make this happen? Mrs. Turley.
It would be hard to come up with another answer that I haven't already heard tonight. Obviously, we need that interstate access. That goes without saying. We also know that it's a long process. Those of you who were involved in any way with the expansion of our bypass, where I own some property at the corner of Reed Road and 144, and they went diagonally through it. That was not an easy process, and it wasn't very pleasant for me either. But that's a long, long haul. And when there's federal money involved, and we know how the federal government is struggling, when there's money that has to be put in by the state, and then lands that have to be acquired, and bridges that have to be built, we're talking about a very difficult process, but we must do everything we can to get it done.
Thank you, Mrs. Turley. Mr. Thompson, would you like me to repeat the question? Owensboro's mayor, the Davis County Judge Executive, and the Chamber believe that the number 1 long-term economic development asset would be securing an interstate highway for our region. What actions would you take to make this happen?
Well, transportation corridors are critically important to communities. Statistics show that the that the net worth, the minimum income for people that live along interstate corridors is about 10% higher than those communities that are not along interstate corridors in terms of their economic wealth. It's important that we have those corridors in Owensboro and Davis County. I-69 is an important project, but the reality of I-69 is that you have to build a bridge across the Ohio River between Evansville and Henderson at the cost of about $1.4 billion. That's today. I'm not sure where that money will come from. We don't have it at the state level. The Federal Highway Trust Fund does not have it. The only way that could become a reality is if we toll it. And if you toll that, there could be people seeking other routes as opposed to that. I think the most viable option is the I-67 option, which would we could start all the way down in Birmingham, come up I-65 to Nashville, take the Parkway all the way into Owensboro, cross a bridge that we already have, and then go up to I-64, and then Indiana needs to build 28 miles to go up and to connect with I-69, which could be much more feasible and done quicker. I think that corridor is realistic. I'm working with Secretary Hancock to do everything we can in Kentucky, but as you all know, we need Indiana's help to build that 28 miles. I'm willing to work with Governor Pence, with anybody else we can to make that a reality. Obviously, 69, 67 are both important, but I think the 67 project would be much more feasible, much easier. We could see it in our lifetime. It would put Owensboro along an interstate corridor. It would not only give us comfort, convenience, and safety, but would absolutely increase our ability to affect more commerce so we can raise the standard of living for the folks in our community.
Thank you. Mrs. Turley, a 1-minute rebuttal or additional comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. Our next question will go to Mr. Thompson. In July, the State Budget Office announced that Kentucky's, I believe this may go to Mrs. Turley. Is that right? No, it is Mr. Thompson. Thank you. Same question. Here we go. In July, the state budget office announced that Kentucky's budget was short by an estimated $90 million. What specific actions would you take? What legislation would you support? And what specific programs would you cut to help the state maintain the balanced budget? In addition, what is your plan to address the underfunded pension for the Kentucky state employees and our educators' retirement fund?
Kurt, one thing I want to make very clear to our listeners is Kentucky has to have a balanced budget. Unlike Washington, we can't print money. I've seen some commercials talking about Frankfurt's broken budget and out of control budget. We have to have a balanced budget. In the last 7 years of Governor Beshear's administration, we've cut $1.6 billion out of our budget because we need to do in Frankfurt what you all have to do at home. We have to live within our means. We have to tighten our belt. And we've done that, but we've done that by protecting the priorities which hopefully you and most Kentuckians would agree are most important. That's education, human services, and public protection. On the $90 million shortfall that we had at the end of this last biennium, we had to cut programs that aggregated $90 million so that we could balance our budget. The governor cut about 17 different projects to do that. As far as the pension is concerned, it's a challenge that all states are facing. There's 3 components to pensions. The employee contributes, the employer contributes, but 2/3 of pension revenue comes from investment income. And when you all realize what happened back in 2008 and 9 and one of the greatest economic contractions we've had in modern history, the plan lost a lot of investment income. For example, we forecasted to earn 7.5% in 2008 and we lost 18%, but did any of your 401ks have a little bit of reduction during that period of time? We worked in a bipartisan way in 2008 to pass reform to the pensions to where now it's a rule of 87, the combination of age and service, and we're going to save, hopefully with the changes that we've made in a bipartisan way, about $10 billion in Kentucky's pension plan over the next 20 years because of some changes we've instilled. What we have to do in summary for Kentucky's plan is we have to protect the promises that we've made that are protected by an inviolable contract to make sure that those hardworking teachers and employees have the retirement that they've earned, but we've got to make sure that the plan is solid and financially sane going forward.
Thank you. Mrs. Turley, would you like for me to repeat the question?
Okay.
In July, the state budget office announced that Kentucky's budget is short by $90 million. What specific actions would you take? What legislation would you support? And what specific programs would you cut to help maintain a balanced budget? In addition, what is your plan to address the underfunded pension for the Kentucky state employees and our educators' retirement fund?
Well, I really don't like the idea of saying what programs would you cut, because programs imply to us something that's been developed because there's a need for it and there's a place for it and someone is depending on it. What I would rather look at is a very serious look into what is the government waste. What are we spending money on that we don't need to be spending on? Where's their duplicity? Where is their fraud in the system? Do we spend very much time trying to determine is somebody fraudulent in their payments, in the things that they put down to draw some kind of benefit? I'm not talking about cutting a program. I'm talking about seriously investigating what's going on with our money in the state. So I think that would be our first priority, to look into government waste and government mismanagement and government duplicity and deal with those things, not cutting in important programs for people. As far as the shortfall in the pensions are concerned, I hear people talking about how they paid their money into the pension, but the money got swept somewhere else. That isn't right. That money should have stayed there. Another thing that isn't right is who took the liberty to invest their money in risky funds. There's a lawsuit, I understand now, getting ready to happen in the state because they feel like that their money was invested in risky funds. We can't control the market, but we can control what we do in the market. And we have to look that we're not investing our own funds that we may be losing. We're investing other people's that they have worked and paid into the system and expect to be there for them when they retire.
Thank you, Mrs. Turley. Mr. Thompson, a 1-minute rebuttal or additional comments?
Kirk, the forced inactions called taxes that most of us send to Frankfurt and to Washington, we're vested as state legislators and as policymakers to treat that money as the best stewards as we can. That's why in our budget we've strategically worked to protect those priorities that I mentioned earlier. And we've made some significant cuts. My valued opponent here talks about waste, cutting waste. As I said, we've cut $1.6 billion out in the last 7 years, and a lot of programs have been cut 35 and 40%. So we've looked to make sure that we're efficient and we're good stewards of people's money. And as far as the pension's concerned, we've not swept any money out of the pension to go into the general fund. The biggest problem with our pension, and the reason that it's underfunded, is because our investment returns have not been what they've been forecasted to do because of the economic downturn that we've gone through. But we're going to protect the promise that we've made to those that have worked so hard. But at the same time, we're going to be prudent in terms of trying to make sure we continue to work to enhance the financial solvency of those plans.
Okay, Mrs. Turley, a 1-minute rebuttal?
No, thank you.
Okay, final question will go to you, Mrs. Turley. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce has designated tort reform, the local option sales tax, and public-private partnerships among their priorities. What is your position on these issues, and what legislation would you support?
I do support tort reform. I think we have so many frivolous lawsuits that we need to deal with that. We need to look at why we're having doctors, all our physicians are over-testing you. They're doing all kinds of unnecessary procedures just to protect themselves. They're so fearful that they'll be sued and that they can just be sued without really a valid reason. Now, if someone is validly injured, if there's negligence, of course, they need to have some kind of recourse there. But our system is completely out of control, and just like they've mentioned before, doctors don't want to be here. They don't want to stay in the state because we don't have the protections that they need, and their medical malpractice insurance is completely out of control. The LOST, what they call LOST, the local option sales tax, you do hear at the end of that, the last word I just said was the local option sales tax. Remember, that's a tax. And there's a chart that says right now Kentucky ranks 10th in the country in our sales tax rank, which is one of our pluses. We're probably better, well, we are better there than any other area. Let's not destroy that. I like projects. I really like to do projects, and I think they need them to enhance our society, our communities. But we don't want to strap more taxes that people cannot pay to get what we want. And the public-private partnerships, I think I have to agree that as long as they're not mismanaged, they're good.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, would you like for me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. Kurt, on the first issue raised, I think we need to seriously seriously talk about tort reform in Kentucky, particularly an adjunct to that, medical review panels. The purpose of these are to stop frivolous lawsuits. They're not to impede anybody's ability to have a court and to have a hearing by their peers, to go to court and have a jury trial. But they're to stop the frivolous lawsuits. So many suits are filed with the only intention to settle out of court. That just runs up the cost of the system. Unfortunately, here in Davis County, we see some doctors going over and practicing surgery in Indiana to evade the medical tax, the medical malpractice tax. So I think we need to seriously look at medical review panels, particularly because it doesn't impede anybody's ability to still have a trial by jury if they don't like the results of that. It just simply allows that evidence to be introduced into consideration. The local option sales tax, which has been embraced by 37 other states, is the purest form of home rule. It's the purest form of democracy. It allows people to determine the quality of place, where they want to live, and to have that decision themselves. We would first have to pass a constitutional amendment, and then the people of Davis and Ohio counties would have that issue on the ballot. The community would have to sell the specific project, but the local people would be able to make the decision. And there's a misconception. It doesn't necessarily have to be 1%, like Denver passed a 0.1% increase. But what's more fair than allowing local people to determine their local destiny? If you don't want to pass it, you can vote against it. The P3s are a great concept. I voted for it. Representative Miles mentioned earlier that the governor vetoed it. The reason he did was that it was put in that particular bill that it would not allow tolling as one of the options. And I think the only way a lot of P3 projects can work is if we have tolling. But it's the consummate way that business ought to work today, and that's business and government working together. I think if we don't have P3 going forward, we probably won't see a lot of infrastructure project. It's a time whose value has come.
Mrs. Turley?
Yes, I do agree with the medical review boards because they'll be made up of experts, and that's an important part of that tort reform. The local option sales tax is so difficult because it sounds so good. And I do like the idea that we'd have local control. Still, my concern is, do the taxes really come off? They say they will, but my experience has been they don't typically go away if someone finds a way to use them to their advantage. I don't like the idea that there could be people who would take this and use it to have monies to spend to fund a project that could have been built privately. Why don't we just have the multimillionaire build it privately if that's what they want? The tax on people that have fixed incomes that may never use that facility or want that facility is still a bit onerous. So I think that needs a lot more discussion before we jump into that.
And Mr. Thompson, 1 minute
Yeah,
additional
I'd just like
comments?
to add that our Mayor Payne and our Judge Executive Al Mattingly are steadfastly behind, as are many mayors and judge executives across Kentucky, on the LIFT initiative, because they realize that it's a way for local people to have a voice in their future. One of the little communities I represent in Ohio County is called Beaver Dam. They have a restaurant tax, which we cannot impose in Owensboro, but they passed that. Now they have a tremendous amphitheater there that's an incredible asset for their community, where they're attracting people. But the thing about the LIFT initiative that's so good is a lot of that is paid from people that are outside of our community, that come into our community to shop and visit, and they pay that tax. But there are some good things that come from investments, such as prudent investments in education and prudent investments in job creation. The LIFT initiative would be a prudent initiative to let a community decide what its quality of place will be.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Time now for closing remarks, and we'll begin with Mr. Thompson. You have 1 minute for our closing remarks. Thank you.
Well, Kirk, I want to thank everybody for attending tonight and for you all giving us a chance to share our vision with you. As I mentioned, I've had the privilege of serving this community for now the last 6 terms, and I've taken that responsibility very seriously. And I hope that you will give me the opportunity to take my leadership skills, my experience, and my seniority to continue to be a spokesperson for this community. You know, President Clinton said the other day that elections, David, are job interviews, and you all will make a decision as to whether we get hired or not. I hope that you will give me the privilege of hiring me to go back and represent you. And I want to make one thing very clear. There's been a lot of attempts to assign people or morph candidates into other people. I'm not responsible to the President of the United States. I'm not responsible to anybody in Washington. I'm only responsible to one group of people, and that's the people in the 14th Legislative District. And I want to make 2 promises tonight. I'll never forget who I work for, and I'll never let you down. I hope you give me the privilege to continue to serve you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Closing remarks, Mrs. Turley.
Thank you. I'd like to also take this opportunity to clear up some misconceptions. I'm holding here the Kentucky Right to Life endorsement sheet, and on it says they have endorsed me, the Kentucky Right to Life. ALPAC has, Senator Paul is going to endorse me, but on it also says Tommy Thompson gave no response to their questionnaire and did not vote to advance pro-life bill SB 8, later changed his vote to yay. So they considered that not being in the best interest of the unborn, but more in the political interest. It's very important to me that we advance all of the pro-life bills, that we do whatever is necessary to bring them to the floor for an up or down vote in the House, where they always die in committee. So it's important that we go there with an objective and a goal, and for the lives of those that have not lived yet, that there's a plan for their life to give them that opportunity. We want to go and support the pro-life bills all the way to passage. Thank you.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our 2 candidates for District 14, the Kentucky Legislature, Tommy Thompson and Marion Turley. An educated voter is the greatest asset to any democracy. Please take your time to vote. We have a very large ballot on Tuesday, and it's important that you do your homework. We hope that these debates that the Greater Owensboro Chamber of Commerce has produced and provided for our community will help you make sure that your voice is heard. It will only be heard if you turn up at the polls next Tuesday, November 4th. On behalf of the candidates, our great staff at the Greater Chamber of Commerce, and our very polite audience and enthusiastic, thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the polls. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.